Well. Hi, beautiful souls. Welcome back to another Becoming Supernatural live discussion. I'm so glad you're here. Um, I'm actually on time tonight. I didn't think I was going to be on time, but I'm here on time for the third. Is this the third week? I think it's the third week we've been doing this. I'm so proud of me and I'm so proud of you. So, welcome back. I am Brittany, your manifesting mentor. I'm not a coach, I'm not a guru, but I'm a woman who lives this work every single day. And I help others to do the same so that they can live a life that they truly desire and deserve. So if that sounds good to you, stay tuned for what we're about to get into. Tonight, we're closing out chapter 3. We are reviewing parts 4 and 5. And this is where the theory starts turning into testimony. Okay, I'm going to assume that if you're watching this replay or if you're here with me live, you've already read or listened to parts 4 or 5 of chapter 3. Part 4 is where Dr. Joe shares the story of his son Jace, and he tells how Jace, sorry about that, he tells how Jace manifested his dream opportunity by using the exact principles that he goes over in chapter 3, which is actually in chapters 1 through 3, which is setting a clear intention, an elevated emotion, and surrender. Okay. And he used these tools and techniques to basically manifest his dream opportunity. And in part 5, we're going deeper into preparing your energy for a quantum experience. So basically, we're going to be tuning our bodies and minds in for a meditation that helps you access your future self, access that energy of your future self. So grab a journal, get grounded, and let's tune into what these two parts are asking or requiring us to embody. All right. As you know, I've already written my notes. Just see. I think I had. No, I got my notes. Here we go. So, part 4, Jace Goes Quantum, is a real life manifestation story. Okay. Um, Jace, which is Dr. Joe Dispenza's son, was discouraged. I'm not telling the chapter, but he was discouraged because he couldn't find the right job. And so he used his dad's technique, his teachings, because his daddy is the GOAT, of setting a clear intention, feeling an elevated emotion, and then letting go. And I know when we talk about letting go in this community, a lot of times people think that it means giving up on your dream. It absolutely does not. What it means is surrendering. Surrendering the what? Surrendering the how. He let go of how and allowed the field, the unified field, the quantum field, to organize something unexpected. In other words, he started living by the energy of his future self, the version of him who already had that dream opportunity, and he tuned into it because that's what Dr. Joe gets us to do in the part 5, which is tuning into new potentials. And within a week, he got the exact opportunity seemingly out of nowhere. So he literally became supernatural and allowed himself to tune into a potential that actually drew that opportunity to him. And if you remember the details of the opportunity, it was down to the T. Like Dr. Joe got him to be very specific because that's what setting a clear intention is. Is stepping back from being too vague, because sometimes when you're too vague, you get some of anything. And we don't want just anything. We want specific, right? I'm pretty sure at any point in time in your journey, you probably can recall when you set a clear intention yourself. Maybe it was you prayed for your first home, or that you would be married one day, or I don't know, for a particular amount of money in your job salary, or to win the lottery, whatever the case may be. You can recall that time when you set a very clear intention, when you felt like the one to get the blessing, as Reverend Ike would say. And from feeling like the one to get the blessing, you were walking in that energy. You were embodying it. You were excited because you just felt like something good was on the way. That's what Dr. Joe was telling his son he needed to do. And in doing so, he also told him to release the how, to surrender, to not be checking the 3D for emails, to not be looking for proof of where it is, because then you'd be back in the familiar. You'd be living from the memories of your past instead of being inspired by your future, right? And so within a week, that opportunity literally found him while he was randomly in some kind of surf shop. And it was the exact opportunity, down to the flexibility, down to how he felt like he was his own boss, down to the team that he had, down to how he felt like, the job would make him feel more like he's in love with life. It was down to the feeling that the job would give him. And so that's what Dr. Joe pretty much primes us for in the next section. But I wanted to share, like, this story really landed for me because we've all had these moments, as I mentioned before, where it felt like nothing was working, right? But behind the scenes, our energy was already attracting something aligned. And I can recall this on a number of instances. I spoke about on my TikTok and my YouTube recently how I manifested several times going to Beyonce concert. Speaking of Cowboy Carter tour that just kicked off this week, and yes, I manifested tickets about 4 times. All right. And they were 4 different opportunities, years apart, obviously. But the fact that I manifested these opportunities multiple times, people who know me, who know, they call me like the contest queen in that regard. But I literally applied these principles before I even knew about Dr. Joe's work. I think at the time I was already a student of Neville, so none of this is new information. If you know, you know. But what I love about Dr. Joe is he's bringing the science behind it. So it's not mysticism anymore. Now you can really, if you didn't fully believe before, now you can really believe. And on top of that, you can understand what's happening within you and within your body. And on top of that, if you've ever run into roadblocks or negative patterns that you recognize, you can rid yourself of that because it doesn't have to be that way. And that's what I love about Dr. Joe's teachings. So just like the things that I can recall that I manifested, by not looking for evidence, by trusting and not giving into the notion that things aren't working because I didn't see anything happening. Jace didn't manifest it by pushing. He manifested it by becoming aligned. And then he trusted the divine source, the unified field, the quantum field, whatever you want to call it. However, whatever floats your boat, the divine is what I like to call it. When he started to trust, that's when everything fell into place. And like Dr. Joe says, when you find yourself in this conditioning, when you find yourself in this kind of way of thinking and way of existing, you start to find that you don't have to go out there to do anything to try to force or manipulate or make something happen. That's what Dr. Joe calls matter to matter. And that's what he calls the Newtonian way of living life. And it's something that has worked for us, obviously. We all know the hustle hard. We all know the grind until you get it. We all know that. But I think a lot of us are waking up to the other way of allowing things to materialize, where it doesn't feel like a hustle or it doesn't feel like a draft. It just feels like flow. And that doesn't mean you're not necessarily taking action. What it means is you're not trying to force. You're not moving from a frequency of lack. You're actually moving as though you know the steps that you're taking are divinely leading you to what it is you're going to do. The movements that you're making, even the slight coincidences, the synchronicities, the meetings that you may have with people, that it just flows naturally. And that's what happened to Jace when he was in the surf shop. He randomly, this guy came in and had the opportunity that happened to be his dream job. And so this is where we find ourselves in the process of manifesting. So, what does it really mean? This person asked, what does it really mean to let go in manifestation? Letting go means stop controlling. It means stop controlling. You're not trying to force or manipulate anything. It doesn't mean stop caring, as I mentioned before. It's choosing trust over tension. It's choosing trust over anxiousness. It's choosing trust over frustration and trying to figure things out. Okay? You've done your part by becoming the energy. That is more than enough. Now give the universe room, the divine room to deliver. Okay? Deliver it in the highest form for the greatest good of all. right? I usually like to lace my manifestations with that prayer. Bring it to me in the most flowing way for the greatest good of all. Because I don't want for the harm to none and the greatest good of all. I always say that part too, because I don't want anybody to be harmed in the process, and I want all parties to be benefited by whatever it is I'm manifesting. So it doesn't have to be any losers in my world. In my world, we all win, right? Because we all get exactly what we want. Okay. The next person submitted a question and asked, "How do I stay in faith when I don't see the results yet?" Um, Faith is like a muscle, and I feel like it grows in silence. It grows in practice. It grows when you build a trust within yourself. So every time you choose the emotion of your outcome more than you choose a memory of your past, you start to build trust within yourself that, like, oh, life can get really good for me. And I could trust myself to shift my focus when I'm not focused on something that's beneficial to what it is I'm praying for. So even without the outcome, you're shifting into a new signal, right? That's how faith works. Your body doesn't need proof. It needs consistency. That's a bar, actually. Drop that in the comments. My body doesn't need proof. It needs consistency, because consistency is what will give you faith. I said a prayer a lot years ago, right? And part of why I'm even doing this live, part of why I'm even doing these readings and all the things, is because I said a prayer years ago where I wanted to be able to contribute to these platforms of social media, to put out what felt like authentic expression of positivity, inspiration, motivation, spiritual awareness, and teachings. Like, I wanted to contribute for a very long time, and I have been in my own ways. But I will say this thing: I was not always very consistent. I've told part of this story of how I had more than one YouTube channel in the past. And for the first time in all of my social media YouTube journey, I find myself being consistent. And it's because, mostly because, I understand where what consistency is, and I understand that it's helping me build my faith, right? And that's what Dr. Joe is basically getting you to understand. We call it, in this community that Dr. Joe has created for himself through these teachings, we call it doing the work. And no matter how many testimonials you with stories of transformation on his YouTube channel, the common thread that you'll hear is, I started doing the work. I doubled down. I started taking the work seriously. And each and every one of these people, when they found themselves being consistent, and to me, them choosing to be consistent was exercising faith. Because at best, and Dr. Joe even says this in his workshops, that it's all one big experiment. And I've said this at the beginning of these readings, that this is all one big experiment, right? You don't know what you know until you've done it, right? And so you're learning these things and they sound like they're resonating, but you don't really know until you start doing the work consistently. And as you do it consistently, you start getting those results. And when you start getting those results and they keep coming in because you're consistent, I'm sorry, you're being consistent, you know that it has to be because of something that you are doing. But what we're actually learning is that it's not what you're doing, it's what you're being. You're being the version of you who doesn't let up. You're being the version of you who could get knocked down and get back up again. You're being the version of you who might not see evidence right away, but you're still maintaining your faith by taking steps in that direction still. So that's what I would say about staying in faith. It's not, you won't be perfect in this process, because I'm not perfect in this process. Dr. Joe's not perfect in this process. And as I mentioned before, all the masters who teach anything spiritually will let you know that they're not perfect in their process of faith. But what they are really good at is being consistent. And that's a muscle that you build, because consistency is at the core of faith. If you can be consistent in persisting, right? Persisting in the path. You get knocked off, you make a mistake, you get back on. That's it. We don't dwell on mistakes. We don't dwell on moments where we miss the mark, or sin, as they say. Sin is to miss the mark. We don't dwell on that. We recognize, we grow aware, and then we make a different choice, and we get back on the boat, or get back on the horse, or whatever metaphor resonates with you. but we get back in alignment. So it's not about staying in faith, it's about being consistent and in returning, even when you're not feeling like you can believe in the moment. Have your moment and then get back on track. All right, I said a lot. That was part 4. And Mr. Jace got his manifestations. And I know you got some stories about manifestations that you've gotten. And we got some stories about some manifestations that's on the way. So if you happen to get some manifestations that's as a result of you practicing what's in chapter 3, come back here and leave a comment because I want to know. Okay, cool. Can we continue? Shall I proceed? Yes, indeed. Okay, cool. So, part 5 is tuning in to new potentials meditation. And this is the section where Dr. Joe basically gets us to prepare our mind and our bodies. Okay. Some of the talking points that I wrote from this section is that this part introduces tuning into new potentials meditation. And this is one of my favorite meditations. My top favorite, and I did my 3 top favorite meditations from Dr. Joe. My first one is Blessings of the Energy Centers. And that's one that we're going to get into in chapter 4, which I'm excited about because that is one of the meditations where a lot of people have healing testimonies from chronic illness, terminal illness, all the things, miraculous healings. Um, and that is just my go-to. It's one of the ones that help me feel refreshed and revitalized no matter what's been going on, what's happened throughout my day. This meditation, though, is he's teaching you how to drop off from the burdens of whatever you might be dealing with in your reality. He's helping you to disconnect your subconscious mind from the familiar, from the memories of the past, especially those that don't serve you. And he's helping you slow down your brain waves from beta, which is the analytical part of your brain that's always chatting and thinking and trying to figure things out and connect the dots, and drift into alpha and theta and gamma brain waves, which are much slower in frequency, right? And that is where he says that opens the door to the autonomic nervous system when we can get in alpha, theta, and gamma brain waves, where the subconscious mind is open and receptive to new ideas and new information. So from here, he says that before entering the meditation, we should shift from survival mode to creation mode. And that is, how do we do that? We get into lower brainwave frequencies in a meditative state. And then he says we then shift into heart coherence, where we tune into the heart center and we just put our attention and awareness on it. And why do we do that? Because where our attention is where our energy is. And if our attention is out there on all the problems, people, circumstances, and things that we are familiar with, then it's not a whole lot of energy that we're putting here. But he says that when we start putting our attention and awareness here in this heart center, our heart and brain go into what he calls coherence. They become in sync with one another. And when we are in brain and heart coherence, our electromagnetic field becomes magnetized, right? For whatever intentions we set and whatever elevated emotions we can feel towards that intention, we become magnetized. So he gets us to disconnect from the known and open up to the unknown. And he says that once we're in this unknown phase where we're not focused on the past or the familiar, but instead we're lingering in the unknown, he says this practice helps collapse the gap between wanting and becoming, because we release the thoughts, we release the emotions that have us like this, holding on to the familiar. And when we can release that, we become open and creative. And that's when we can let in something new. That's when we can tune into a potential. And in that meditation, he gets you to literally dial in to a potential that you prefer, to a potential that you actually desire to happen. And you can't really do that if you're focused on what's familiar, if you're having inner conversations about the past, or even if that was 5 minutes ago. You can't really tune into anything new when you're fixated on what you don't like about what you already know, when you're fixated on the familiar. So this practice is helping you to tune in to that new potential the longer you linger in the unknown. So this reminded me that it's not about meditating perfectly, right? Because at the beginning, he tells you that every time you drift off into thinking about your familiar past, right? You'll notice because you'll pay attention, you'll be paying attention to where your thoughts go. But every time you drift off into thinking about the familiar past, you're lingering in the energy of the familiar, which means you're not primed for what it is you're calling in. You're not embodying the version of you who has it because you're too busy embodying what you think you already know, right? Because a memory is what? It's tied to an emotion, it's tied to what's familiar. So he says it's about creating space to move beyond your mind's limitation. And that's exactly what he encourages you to do in the meditation. Every time you drift into something that's familiar, he says, lovingly guide yourself back to the present moment. Be in that present moment. Linger there. Drop all identification with what's around you, with who's in your life, with what problems you think you have, with what pain you might think you feel in your body. And every time I sit and I tune in when I'm in this meditation, I feel my future getting closer. Why? Because it's only the familiar that makes me feel separate from my good. If you can relate to that, let me know. It is only what you're familiar with, your memories of the past, the things that you think you know, that make you feel separate from your good. Because if you dropped who you think you are and you dropped all the problems you think you have, and I'm not saying your problems aren't real, I'm just saying if you dropped your identification with those problems, then you wouldn't see anything as separate from you. You see everything as potential. You wouldn't feel separate from your good. And so every time I sit and I tune in, I feel my future getting closer, not because things are necessarily changing, but because I'm changing. I'm changing what I'm tuning into. I'm changing what I give my attention to. Because now I understand from these teachings that attention is the greatest currency bestowed upon mankind. Everybody else out there in certain systems understand that, but the everyday person does not understand that. And this is why things like social media can rob us of the greatest currency. Things like television programming can rob us of the greatest currency that we have, which is our attention. Think about it. 24-hour news cycle. I studied journalism and I did not become a reporter because spiritually it wasn't in alignment for me. But the 24-hour news cycle will get you to tune into something of negativity constantly, constantly, constantly. And you don't realize it, but before long, you're angry, you're frustrated, you're not really um, tuned into anything that gives you hope or of possibility. In fact, you're more aware of all the problems that exist. And it's not that you shouldn't know these things, but how much of your energy are you giving these things? How much of your attention are you giving these things? Because that attention is exactly what you need to turn your situation around, to draw your manifestation onto you, to build that dream life of yours. Like you need your attention. That's why I love Dr. Joe's teaching so much. And I'm so grateful. So much so that I'm on this internet reading his book chapter by chapter. Lord have mercy. So someone asked the question, what if my mind won't stay still during meditation? That's exactly what I talked about. Dr. Joe talks about in that section. That is very normal. You know, meditation is not about being perfect. Meditation is about practicing becoming the best observer of yourself that you can be. Because the more you observe yourself, the more you can catch yourself when you're drifting off into a familiar pattern. You can catch yourself when you're drifting off into something that's familiar, because that will let you know you're either living by the energy of your future or you're living by the energy of your past. So if you leave feeling more connected, more open, and more grateful, you tuned in. If you leave feeling more whole and complete, you tuned in. It's not about visuals, it's about vibration, it's about energy. Do you feel more calm? Because that is enough to indicate that you did what needed to be done. You connected with source. You tuned in. You found more peace and calm within yourself. It's not about being perfect. I hope that helps. Um, Question number 2, how do I know if I'm doing the meditation right? Exactly what I just said. You'll know that you did it right by the way you feel. Did it influence your frequency. That's how I like to look at it. Did it influence the frequency that I'm putting off? Um, do I feel better as a result of sitting and tuning into this meditation than I did before I sat down? And if my answer is yes, then I connected like how I needed to. So if you leave feeling more connected, more open, more grateful, you have tuned in. Um, yeah. Basically, the win is when you notice the thought and you gently return back to your breath or to the present moment. That's all you need to focus on. There's no right or wrong, really. But you'll know that if you have a shift energetically, you've done what needed to be done. And so is that covers part 5. And so I guess we'll basically, if we understand anything that this chapter taught us, it's this: you don't manifest what you want, you manifest what you are aligned with, you manifest what you embody. And alignment happens when the mind gets clear, when you have a clear intention, and you present that with elevated emotion, aka the heart gets elevated, and then you let go or you surrender the timeline. You surrender when it has to happen and how it has to happen. All right. If you had any additional takeaways, if you had any additional comments, please leave them below. As you know, we do like to go back to these comments and I discuss them on future lives or on my social media platforms. Stay tuned for chapter 4, where we'll go even deeper into changing our energy and releasing old patterns. I do believe this is the chapter that goes over blessings of the energy centers, which is my favorite meditation. Um, I'm so proud of you for showing up, for practicing, and for trusting the unseen. Someone commented on one of my previous videos that they just started this series and they're so glad they did because they've been meaning to. So I'm glad you found this series as well. As I said, I did this because I know that a lot of this content could be complex. And I truly believe in building community around something as powerful as this, right? It's like people who have Bible study or or things that they feel elevate their spirit or edify them. For me, this edifies me and it helps me, you know, get more in tune with my mind and my body, to be more connected holistically and to see miracles unfold with intention. So your next level is already waiting for you in the quantum, right? It's already waiting for you. It already exists. And all you need to do is what Dr. Joe taught in this chapter, and that is tune into that new potential. I don't know who needs to hear this, but this is your reminder, and you got this. I'll see you next time.